All right, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Mauna Kea Management Board. Just a little bit late after 10 a.m. In addition to the board members that we have present, Roger Moto, Doug Simons, myself, Greg Moores, Barry Mizuno, Lehua Vincent, Keelan Springer, and Herring Alua. We have on the line Greg Chun.
Excuse me,
and
sir. Could you stand one side or the other?
yeah, Shane Palacott Nelson representing Kahu Mauna. So, gentlemen, I know how difficult it is to participate on the phone, so when you have something to say, please speak up enthusiastically, and we'll try to recognize you. All right, first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the May 5th, 2015 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
So moved.
So, okay, moved by Hannah, second?
Second.
Second by Lehua. Are there any changes to the minutes as circulated? On the line, Greg, any changes?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Hearing none, I will call the question then. All in favor of approving the minutes as circulated, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed. Okay, thank you. Second item on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes from July 28th when we went into executive session. There's actually 2 minutes circulated, one of the general meeting and one is a summary of the executive meeting. Could I have a motion to approve those, please? Motion by Doug Simons, second.
Second.
Second by Lehua Vincent. All right, any changes to the minutes as circulated? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes as circulated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
None opposed. Okay, the minutes for all 3 meetings have now been approved. Next item on the agenda would be the director's report. Stephanie?
Good morning, everyone. It's been a while, since May. I'd like to start off with the comprehensive management plan and its implementation. I gave my annual report to the Board of Land and Natural Resources on June 12th. It's a requirement of the approval of the plan by the Board of, by the DLNR, that we provide annual reports in writing and in person. OMKM, I'd like to report, is pretty much on schedule. In terms of meeting the schedule that it had outlined back when we had, when we were given approval of the CMP. Most of it are either ongoing or in progress. Ongoing meaning that these are actions that the office will be continuing to implement because they don't have an ending date. These are part of the OMKM's management responsibilities. In progress are those that we have started and they're still in the process of being worked on and completed. There are a number of actions that are classified as needed, meaning that they will be implemented at the time an activity or a project is approved or is given approval to move forward, and these actions then become active. For example, construction projects. These are construction management activities that apply to those kinds of activities. Others were then also classified as mid to long term, so those are a little bit down the line in terms of implementation. We are now in the 5-year review phase. However, that review may be deferred due to circumstances arising from the governor's plan for his stewardship of the mountain. This will be discussed later on in the agenda. Facilities 5-year plan. Kahu Mauna has requested that all observatories prepare a 5-year plan involving the improvements or additions to their facilities. The council was not pleased with the piecemeal approach by facilities in their proposal to the office, and instead they are looking to streamline that process. And conceptually, it is each facility will prepare a 5-year plan. The council will then review it, and these plans can go from minimal impact to major projects. They will review it, and those projects that are considered minimal impact then would not necessarily have to go through the council for review. They would do that one-time review. Each year, we're going to be requesting, and this is still a work in progress, but this is conceptually what we're thinking of, is that every year the facilities would submit an updated plan, and then it would always be a 5-year plan, so you're always including an extra year into the plan. Fritz is now working with Celeste Ha'o from Kahu Mauna on development of this plan, and this will be presented to the observatory directors at their annual users meeting in September. The annual archaeological monitoring of historic properties is nearly complete. This year, the survey areas included the remote sectors of the northern sector of the Science Reserve. On May 26, the governor announced major changes in the stewardship of Mauna Kea. In his plan, he asked that the university make 10 significant changes related to the enhanced stewardship of Mauna Kea. On June 1st, the university responded briefly by describing its plan for complying with the governor's request. Among the requests were a restart of the EIS process, a decommissioning of 25% of the summit facilities by the time TMT is operational, and withdrawing 10,000 acres from the Mauna Kea Science Reserve and giving it back to full DLNR authority. Included in your packets is the press release that was issued by the governor, talking about his plan and the 10 items that he requested the university to comply with, and the university's response. The environmental impact statement that the university had started a year ago is being put on hold temporarily. We will obviously need to restart the whole process, including the EIS prep notice, but that will be deferred until we can make work it out with DLNR in terms of the lands that will be given back to them, the lands that will be withdrawn from the Science Reserve lease, and what responsibilities each entity would then be having to carry forward once this is done. Administrative rules, we had held open house sessions, public open house sessions on June 23rd, 24th, and 25th in Kona, Hilo, and Waimea respectively. All of these sessions were open to the public. Many of them came in and they had an opportunity to review the suggested rules that we had put out for public review. And these rules, as we try to explain to individuals with that, were to rules that we thought would meet the challenges that we face managing the mountain with respect to public access and commercial activities. We had many surveys that we had requested individuals to fill out. Those surveys describe the challenges that we face in terms of public access and commercial activities. And many of them filled it out. We received over 80 survey, and generally, most of them agreed with our suggested rules. One of the governor's steps in his new stewardship plan was to move forward expeditiously with the development and the approval of the rules. But again, similar to the comprehensive management plan review and update, we may have to put rules a little bit on hold because the rules are tied in with the CMP. The 30-meter telescope, many of you are aware of what has happened, but I'll just briefly describe. The period between April 2nd and June 22nd, activities on the mountain were fairly quiet related to the protesters. A number of protesters still continue to camp across the street from the visitor information station. On June 22nd, a group of individuals erected an ahu with stones not from the Mauna Kea summit area and placed it in the middle of the TMT access road. And on June 23rd, another ahu was constructed on the TMT site. Those ahus are still in place. Then on June 24th, TMT attempted to access their construction site. TMT crew were met with heavy opposition, starting with a group of protesters blocking the road in front of the visitor information station. The police were able to push the protesters back to the start of the gravel road, at which point docare officers took over Several arrests were made of people who refused to move out of the road. On that day, the officers encountered a number of obstacles, primarily at the first bend. A number of rocks and boulders were strewn across the road, and it prevented TMT from advancing beyond and making headway to their access to their site. At that point, OMKM had to close the road. It was not passable due to the rocks that were in the middle of the road. It was also reported and documented that there were rock walls that were constructed further up the road at between the 3 and a 3.5 mile marker, as well as another Ahu that was placed in the middle of the road. On June 25th, with the help of our chief ranger and discussions with the protesters, they removed the rock walls between the 3 and the 3.5 mile marker, but the Ahu still remained. But that was eventually removed the day after. As a result of the obstructions that were placed in the roadway, the Attorney General deemed that there was imminent peril to the resources and requested that DLNR adopt emergency rules. On July 10th, the Land Board approved these emergency rules, they passed the emergency rules, which were later approved by the governor on July 14th. And this rule prohibits individuals from possessing camping gear, equipment, and prohibit individuals from being in the restricted area from the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. unless they are transiting through the restricted area. The restricted area is defined as 1 mile on either side of the access road. On July 31st, DLNR enforcement officers arrested several individuals who were camping across from the VIS for violating the emergency rules. On June 25th, the visitor information station was closed, including the restrooms and the portable toilets. The VIS could no longer remain open because staff were becoming more and more uncomfortable with the presence of protesters camped across the road from the VIS, and resulting in activities that were having an impact on the VIS and the VIS staff. In addition, resources, especially the water usage at the VIS, were being used at an unsustainable level. On August 4th, though, with the removal of some of the protesters by the DoCare officers, the visitor information station reopened. Finally, the appeal of the TMT Conservation District use permit. The appellants in the appeal requested that their appeal be transferred from the Intermediate Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. On June 5th, the Supreme Court accepted the transfer and scheduled oral arguments on August 27th. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Board members, any questions for Stephanie about her report? Hannah?
I just need some clarification. Was camping not a prohibited activity on the mountain?
On DOFA lands, I believe you need to have a permit, but it is these emergency rules are put under the hunting rules, and there were no rules related to camping under hunting rules.
So because these lands were not under DOFA management, camping was permitted prior to the emergency
Those lands
rules.
are DOFA lands, they're forest reserve lands.
So camping was prohibited prior to the emergency rules?
No camping, you needed a permit to camp,
You needed
yeah.
a permit to camp. Is camping then permissible outside of the 1 mile zone, near to the road?
Apparently so.
With a permit?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If it's in forest reserve lands.
All right, any other questions for Stephanie? Okay, hearing none. Next item on the agenda, Shane, report from the Kahu Mauna Council.
Yeah, well, hello, Greg. So right now we just want to go ahead and recommend 2 candidates for Kahu Mauna. The first one is Uilani Naipo, and the second one would be Leningrad Illarionov. I can give a brief background, a little bit of brief information about Uilani. She, her background is in Hawaiian studies. She also has some background in the Kalai Va'a, or the Va'a community, particularly with Makali'i. Her scope is navigation, so she's very accustomed to the heavens, the stars, etc. She, in fact, that's her strong point, actually. Traditional navigational skills is her strong point, which gave her her connection to the Mauna. The second one is Leningrad Ilarinov, old-time community member, very long standing. He comes from the burial council. His mother comes from Kohala, and he was born in Kahu, and was always shared a lot of stories of the Kohala district, and particularly Mauna Kea area. His interest in becoming a Kahuku Mauna council is to be able to share what his mother had shared with him, and his families, and all of his experiences put together. And I think he would make a good kupuna on our Kahuku Mauna council. So pretty much that's about it. Stephanie had given you some details of what we were working on as far as the 5-year management plan for each telescope.
All right, well, thank you, Shane. I'd like to entertain each of these applications separately. These have been circulated to the board members, the applications for the Kahuku Mauna Council. Let's take up Uilani's application first. We have a motion from Kahuku Mauna to approve. Can I get a motion from this board for approval of Uilani?
Sorry, I don't have that.
Can you pass this over, please? I have a motion from Doug Simons. Can I get a second? And then we'll answer any questions you may have. Second by Roger Emoto. Let's give Lehu a moment to review this. Apparently he did not receive his. Yeah, it was sent out a couple weeks ago, prior to the meeting.
This sheet doesn't have Lenin.
Oh, I've got Leningrad's as well. The rest of the board members receive this information. Lehu, did you have any questions now after reviewing
But maybe for just one, for information, if we could talk about how members are nominated, selected,
Sure.
process.
Shane?
Shane?
Shane, the question from Lehu Vincent was if you could explain the nomination process, how candidates are proposed to you and how your group takes action, that would be helpful.
Okay, sure. So when we have vacant seats, we actually try to go out and solicit people in the community. Also, we send out probably informational notices to Native Hawaiian groups, like the Hawaiian Civic Clubs. traditionally that was a practice in the past. And then once applications come in, we review each applicant and we go through an interviewing process. In the interviewing process, we ask questions, particularly cultural practicing questions and how they arrive to their conclusions as far as discussions in our interview process. And after that, we then deliberate on each member, each candidate, and we come up with a recommendation for MKMB to vote on. And Steph, if you can, did I miss anything on that?
No. Then according to the master plan, the Mauna Kea Management Board's responsibility is to approve members of the council.
Okay, Lehu, any other questions? Hannah?
Taking occupation and geography of origin or residency into consideration?
I'm sorry, what was that, Fiona?
Are occupational affiliations as well as cultural and lineal taken into consideration, and geography of either origin or residency?
Yeah, most recent, Uncle Herring had mentioned that we should be looking at geography, so we've been putting geography as a priority. And occupation, as far as I'm concerned, I think we were more concerned with participation and having a good balance of different backgrounds. So occupation would come in at some point, yes.
Thank you. I had seen Herring's comments regarding geography, so that's why I asked. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Shane.
Yep.
Harry, any comment? Harry?
No, I thought that was important that you get people from the geography.
Sure.
And you have a representative all the time from, then you have a guarantee, a community participation in this whole process. And also with the board, helping the board out, you get a representative from the
Very, very good input. Thank you, Sharon, Herring. All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments about the first applicant, Uilani Naipo?
Very good. Who's rotating off?
Shane or Stephanie, who's rotating off of Kahu Kumana?
Tiffany Kakalia and Tony Mallow.
All right, no other questions. I will call for the question, or call the question. All in favor of supporting the nomination of Uilani Naipo to Kahu Kumana, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed, the unanimous approval. Okay, the second application is for Leningrad Illarionov. Can I have a motion to approve Leningrad? Moved by Herring Kalua, second. Second by Lehua Vincent. Any questions about Leningrad?
I just want to thank, what
Shane?
Shane said, a kupuna.
Sorry, was that Lehua? Sorry, I cannot hear
Oh,
very well.
Shane, it was me, Herring.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I heard you say that Leningrad was a kupuna, and I just wanted
Yeah.
to say thank you, and then we need that kupuna all the time. It doesn't matter what district they come from, but we need to get the kupunas, and then that way the communication and things can go down to the next generation. Thank you, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, mahalo for her.
On a personal note, I listened to Leningrad speak to the Hawaiian Burial Council this week, and he does provide great insights. Very impressed. Are there any questions about Leningrad's nomination? Okay, seeing no questions, I will call for the question. All in favor of supporting the nomination of Leningrad Illarionov, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed, another unanimous approval. All right, thank you, Shane, very much, and
Yep.
we will now move ahead in the agenda. The committee reports, the Environment Committee, Roger, will you be handling this, or Fritz? Fritz?
Thank you, Roger. So, the last Environment Committee meeting was on June 17th here, and the two main agenda items that were discussed were Tom Giampaluca presented the Climate Monitoring Network proposal for Mauna Kea. It's still in draft form. Once that gets through some more additional review, we'll bring that before both Kahu Kumana and the Management Board. But that's a project that's one of the action items in the comprehensive management plan is to look at climate monitoring and other environmental monitoring. And so Tom is a geography professor at UH Manoa and a climatologist, and so he's been helping us with that. The other item on the June 17th agenda was invasive species plan updates, and I'll get to that in a minute. Let's see, today actually the Department of Agriculture is having a hearing on emergency rules for, I'm going to look it up because I will say it wrong, but the rapid ohia death, what's the name of the ohia wilt? I don't see the scientific name, but the fungus that affects ohia that is basically proposing to limit the movement of raw wood, untreated wood. So it's a very much similar process to the emergency rules that DLNR went through for the Forest Reserve and the Natural Area Reserve recently. But that, basically for us, it doesn't have any immediate effect for the observatories or any of the other permitted activities because we do not allow any untreated wood on Mauna Kea, on university managed lands. And then sort of moving on to just the general updates, we had an open house at Halepohaku in late May. An open house that was coordinated with the protester group that's occupying the land across the road from the visitor information station, just to share information about the program that we have up here. Part of the conversation, outgrowth of the last management board meeting. And then otherwise, in terms of, I'm just going to go through a few things since it's a long agenda. We've been doing our weekly and monthly ant surveys at Halepohaku. Basically, we've identified no new threats since April. We did have some issues with vespids or wasps. There was at the summit ahu, there was a coconut that had some wasps in it that was removed, and at Halepohaku there was a visitor stung by a wasp, and the vegetation it was associated with was removed in both instances. And since then we haven't had any other problems. So occasionally people will bring stuff up and there are wasps in it, and when we find that, or vegetation that looked like it might present that kind of problem, we remove it. The rangers remove it, I should say. Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you.
Invasive species plan at the June 17th Environment Committee meeting, we presented, I think it was 6, I'm not going to try and count right now, Debbie, somebody maybe can remember. We presented 2 procedures for updates and 3 or 4 for new. Basically there's a couple of final revisions just need to put together, and then given that it's a fairly substantial update, about over 100 pages of updates and revisions to the invasive species plan, I want to give this group, this body, and Kahu Kumana enough time to look at it. So we'll be sending that out well in advance of the next meeting to give you all time to actually digest it. But there's just one last change that came in, and we're adding a graphic to clarify a process, and I just need to write up a caption for it. Annual arthropod monitoring, we completed our annual invasive species and vacubug monitoring in late June and early July. Basically, in a nutshell, we didn't identify any new priority threats. There was a bug called the Bagrata hilaris. It's a stink bug or a rove beetle. It's an agricultural pest found throughout the Hawaiian Islands. First was detected in North America in 2006, so it's rapidly spreading. It's up high, but it feeds on agricultural crops. Per our invasive species plan, it's now sort of something we pay a little extra attention to, but there isn't really any known real threat or anything that we could do about it as far as we know anyway. In terms of vacuum bugs though, it was about an average year, which is very good news. If my memory serves, 2013 was the best year we ever had for vacuum bug abundance. Last year, 2014, was among the worst years we've ever had for vacuum bug abundance. This year is average. In a nutshell, there's still a lot going on that we don't fully understand with natural variability in populations. We don't think there's anything alarming with any of that. It's just natural variability that's not well understood. And Jesse Ivan and crew are working on that. We also completed the annual historic property monitoring with Pacific Consulting Services. It's basically archaeological monitoring. We accompany them both for safety purposes and to do a little rapid invasive species assessment at the sites that they visit. So we've mostly wrapped that up for the year. There might be a few things that we weren't able to get to that we'll try and catch up on. In early June, a couple of our office staff went up to the forest reserve lands across from Halaipohaku with a group from Kahu Charter School, and just gave a presentation on weed pulls with them, and they spent the day pulling weeds. That was a nice day and a good way to work together with folks up there. And then we had a intern this summer, Christian Capono. Originally the task was to help with visitor information station outreach materials and displays. Given the circumstances up there, she came up, and I can't give Christian enough credit for this, but she came up with a plan to have what was called ended up being the Aloha Art Festival at Imiloa, and so it was in partnership with Imiloa. Had a community art festival, had maybe 500 plus people, several hundred public art entries. There was judging. The judges included Suzanne Case from DLNR, Mark Chun, an astronomer with Institute for Astronomy, several members of Kapu Aloha, just to bring everybody together. They chose 3 pieces, and they'll be on display at the Visitor Information Station here in the near future once they're mounted and framed and that process is completed. So stay tuned. Hopefully Imiloa, we'll be working with Imiloa and Christian to get some news out about that. But that was a great event. In addition, we had a couple of volunteer events in June, especially with the Hawaii Youth Challenge National Guard Academy program. A great bunch of kids, and we'll hopefully be doing that every 6 months or so, because that's their cycle of the program at the Youth Challenge Academy. And we have one event scheduled for October, and with the biology club, and more in the works. So we'll be getting word out as those come up. And otherwise, last on my list to mention is just some staffing updates. It was a busy summer. We had 3 interns, 2 UH-ELO PIPES interns, and PIPE stands for Pacific Internship Partnership Exploring Science or something like that. One was Sean Kirkpatrick, no relation to Jessica. He has worked with Dr. Ryan Peroy on the erosion and cinder characterization study. He was particularly looking at remote sensing data and try and use some of the existing remote sensing data to try and characterize cinder size, stratification, and so on, and mineral type and origin, and had great success. And he was also a big help in a lot of our field work beyond his own field work. But essentially, the nice part of that project was his field sites were the arthropod monitoring sites to help better characterize bug habitat. Christian Capono, as I mentioned, who organized the Aloha Art Festival. She is a UH Manoa public health student and is back at UH Manoa now with the start of school as of yesterday. And the 3rd intern was Tisha Pi'ilani Palanka. She's a Hawaii Community College forest team intern. There was a forest team intern, still with the forest team, and she helped map all the trees at Halaipohaku as part of the project that's coming up next, as well as she was our go-to field person for every type of field work that we could throw at her. She took it on and was an amazing field worker and a great help this summer. We wouldn't have been able to do nearly as much. And last but not least, Jessica Kirkpatrick, who many of you have seen at these meetings for the past 3 years, is no longer with our program. The good news is she's gone back to get her master's degree in the Tropical Conservation Biology and Environmental Science program here at UH Hilo. The project she's working on is with Dr. Jesse Iben, and it's basically the overall goal is to understand how to restore alpine arthropod habitat for vacuum bugs. So given pending decommissioning, it's great that while Jessica is no longer with us, she is still working very closely with us, and we're thrilled that she's still working with us, and we're looking forward to it, and I think it'll be a very useful project. And that's another one of those things that eventually here will be coming before this board, because just to talk about some of the reviews and approvals that'll be necessary for some of that work. So, unless, other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Fritz on the Environment Committee? Thank you, Fritz.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda, since we have already approved action item A, is action item B, which is the review and approval of plans for improving ingress, egress, and parking at the visitor information station.
Just a little bit of background on this project. As we all know, that the improvement of the Saddle Road has increased traffic up to the visitor information station considerably and up to the mountain. Easier physical access plus combination with information that's available on the internet has resulted in this tremendous increase in visitors to the visitor information station. The VIS was never designed to handle a large number of individuals. The capacity of the VIS is 56 people, but just about every night you get over 100 people there for stargazing. The VIS parking lot has only 22 parking spaces, and the overflow parking is alongside the roadway in front of the VIS as well as across from the VIS. In addition, as most of you know, there are no street lights. It's very dark. People are walking across the street. We have cars coming down off of the mountain, making for a very dangerous situation and a big concern for our rangers. The Summit Access Road was built in the mid-'80s, and there has never been any major improvements or major maintenance project on that road. There have been minor repairs done, but mostly just patchwork work here. The roadway is deteriorating due to a combination of age and natural earth-moving processes. The edges of the road are beginning to break apart, resulting in water undermining the existing road surface. In 2013, the legislature appropriated $2 million to construct infrastructure improvements and to renovate the mid-level facilities and improve the Summit Access Road. The funds were appropriated by the legislature are to be applied for development and design of construction to address ingress and egress at the visitor information station, which is really part of a bigger project, which is to look at how do we address the redesign of the VIS or expansion of the VIS to accommodate the growing number of visitors, to accommodate them safely, and as well as to accommodate them in the way we feel is appropriate in terms of how we want our visitors to visit the mountain, to have an understanding of the significance of Mauna Kea from a cultural as well as from a natural perspective, and also have to have an understanding of the scientific work that's going on in the mountain. We were only limited in terms of what we could use for designs. $500,000 was allocated for the design work, and that's going to be used to look at road improvements to the Summit Access Road, which is only the paved portion. We're not doing any work on the gravel portion, but to look at remedial work on the paved portion, as well as to look at design for how we would address the visitor information station relook, and to address the ingress and egress situation and parking at the visitor information station. That was, given the amount of monies remaining, that was the only thing that we could really address in terms of construction, is to actually put the redesigned ingress and egress and parking. And also the priority was for the safety of people visiting the mountain. A little bit about the project description. Attached, we provided you a copy of a Google copy of what it looks like. The yellow, where people park, the yellow area that's highlighted is called Zone 1. And that's across the street from the visitor information station. The red zone is Zone 2. It's above the VIS. We have the parking lot itself is Zone 3. And then there's some gravel area below the visitor information station, which is called Zone 4. We did an analysis of the parking for the years 2012 to 2014. And as you can see in this chart, most of the people park in Zone 1, which is across the street. The comprehensive management plan requires that we develop a parking and a visitor traffic plan to be felt. The CMP recognizes that by parking along the shoulder of the road could have an impact on the resources. And they also recommended that you put the parking, the ingress and egress, and pedestrian access on the same side as it is to reduce the safety concerns. There were 2 actions in the CMP that this project would then comply with the CMP. We have today our consultants who are helping us on this project. We have Kurt Mitchell, who is with Kober, Hansen and Mitchell. They were selected by the university to help us with this project. And Robin Ito, who is with SSFM, who is the one who has been designing the ingress and egress. And I will turn it over to you.
Morning, everyone. I am Kurt Mitchell with Hansen Mitchell Architects, and as she introduced, Robin, who's with the Hilo office of SSFM, and she's a civil engineer working on this project. Since Stephanie told you everything that I was going to talk about, I don't think I have to mention too much more, but really get right into why we're here today, which is to seek approval from the board for what we call the egress and ingress of the Viz Center. As she pointed out, we need to have a much more safer ingress and egress, safer for both vehicular and pedestrians. We were up there on what I consider one of the most beautiful nights up at Mauna Kea doing the stargazing, and before it even gotten to a peak crowd, there were over 100 cars parked on the side road, which you call Zone 1, across the street. And it gets quite dangerous when people are walking across and there's no real lights and you can't really see people who are walking or running across the road. So the idea was, as Stephanie pointed out, there's $2 million in this project funding. $1.5 million goes toward construction. So with all of the things that is being asked of the planning team, we needed to put forward what we consider will be, what we think will be the $1.5 million, and what will also coincide as being the top priority for amongst the projects. And the top priority is to mitigate the idea of the dangers that can happen because of vehicular and pedestrians crossing and accessing and egressing out of the Viz Center. So Robin will show you the design of where we're at, and I do want to mention that this design is not being done separately from all the other planning issues that are going on. We talk about it, although we really don't have a physical plan per se for the Viz, but this is important in the sense that we need to get this work done. We feel that this work will fall within the $1.5 million construction funds, And it will also allow any future work that is designed up there to go forward as we talk with the various people that are involved in putting this together. Just to, as an information, we met last week with Kahu Kumana. Uncle Herring was there, and Shane and the rest of the council, and they gave us their input in terms of what they wanted to see, not only with this project that we will show you today, but they will also talk to us about looking at the project in the future. So at this point, I want to turn over the what we call, excuse me, phase one. And Robin, she'll explain the technical aspects of the project.
Thank you. Did it go to sleep?
It went to sleep.
Sorry. Thank you for everyone's patience with the technical difficulties. So, as everyone knows, the mountain has steep slopes, so as we were putting this together,
Should.
there were some challenges to laying out the ingress and egress. So a couple things we had to keep in mind. As you increase parking spaces, you also increase your ADA requirements. And with the, like we said, with the slopes what they are out there, that's a challenge in itself. As well as providing a pickup and drop-off area for not only potential buses, but for anyone else. So what this concept shows is your main entry will now be where this existing entry to the gravel parking lot here is. Cars or whatever come in here, and this is your main parking area. Now, in order to keep with the grades and not creating such a huge impact with having this parking lot just be on a huge hill, we created these ramps. So you ramp down to go to a second tier, and then you ramp down again to go to a third tier. Now, the reason this is only one way is to keep from relocating these cabins that are currently out there. So in order to do that, we had to pull back this parking lot edge and create a one-way situation here. Other than that, everything is two ways. Pedestrians now come up these, because there's a steep slope in between these tiers, there's stairs for pedestrians, and they cross up here, and then they come up to the Viz just as they do now. From the gravel parking lot, they take this path now anyway. And this is where your ADA compliance starts, is you have the sidewalk for pickup and drop off, and then they access the Viz. This existing lot becomes ADA stalls as well as permitted parking for whatever. And then this still remains an entry exit for whoever is up here, as well as pick up and drop off, and then they can come around and loop around again for anything. That is the basic layout. Kurt, anything to add?
Yeah. I just want to reiterate on what Robin has talked about. We have done a topographic survey of this area, and we want to be sure that any improvements is less evasive at all times. So as she pointed out, the parking lot goes with the contours of the mountain right now. So less cut and fill, less disturbance, and basically what we're trying to do is not increasing the parking. We're just taking the parking that is up there now and putting it in a more organized, more safer environment, getting it off the main road, getting it as directed all on one side where the Viz is, and be able so people can safely go from their cars and walk to the Viz or up into that area like the Forest Reserve, but keep everybody on one side of the main road. So we're not adding cars in the sense that we're looking at increasing the amount of visitor opportunities up there. Like I said, when we did our counts, we consistently get about 100 or so cars up there. We are just staying with what is there. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, the parking on the road, is it going to be prohibited or signed as prohibited once this lot is constructed?
I would think it is, it's really up to the management, but if you park on the road, you know, you do run into the danger of, every time you back up, you have, it's not safe.
Right,
Yeah,
well,
people are-
it also degrades the shoulder of the
Yeah,
road.
so we're wanting everybody to park in the parking lot and no one on the road, and I believe that is where management is going, is to not allow parking on the road.
Second question I have is the walkway from the new parking lot to the Viz. Is that going to be lighted in some way?
We could look at, low lighting, I think there is some out there now, that lights the way, that's how we know about the path. But we have to make sure we work with, the staff up there as to the type of lighting that is, allowed. But there is gonna be some lighting, there's gonna be some lighting in the parking lot, but we're gonna try and keep that so that it is more, how should I put it? Showcasing where the actual
lighting.
ground lighting, where the walkway is. We don't want any
Shielded,
above
correct,
ground.
correct.
Yeah.
We're gonna shielded lighting.
Okay.
The lighting
Thank
that we
you.
have now, I'm Joe McDonough, I'm the business manager. The lighting that we have now was actually approved by this board, I think about 2 years ago. It's low voltage, about a foot high, and red lenses, so it's not disturbing stargazing.
The last question I have, and then I'll turn it over to the committee, is the project scalable? And by that I mean, if this comes in on bids is over 1.5 million, is there some way to accommodate that without, scrapping the plans and going back to nothing?
We've talked about that. There's ways of either not building all of the parking lot. You can build a part of it, leaving the rest of it to be built at a later date. You could build only one bay,
Yeah.
if you wanted to.
Yeah.
There's all different kind of, the key thing is really is this portion right in here that we feel is needed for what we're trying to achieve, which is a safe path and a safe place for parking.
In your contract, are you going to be doing the bidding for SSFM?
Yes, we're working with SSFM, they'll put it out to bid. And that's one of the reasons why we're in front of the board now, and why we're seeking approval. They have a schedule, they're under the gun to, and I've been holding them, that they have to complete their set of drawings by December, so that it can be put out to bid in January. And then the university needs that time after that to put the process together, the paperwork, and what they need, be able to select their contractor, and then award the bid before June 30th.
Thank you. Questions? Harry?
Bidding, when they do the bidding, do they try to make it as close as possible to the money that is that 1.5 million that you have, to be sure that this project, because when they bid to what they think it's worth, if I'm correct. Now, anything goes out of that, if it's not added to that, then it should be able to put that project that we see right there, a finished product.
Right. We are going to bid and put out the bid and construct whatever we can for $1.5 million.
Okay.
That's
Now, there's always a question, I would think, the unforeseen part.
Yeah.
This one won't have an unforeseen part.
We try to, but you're right, nothing is ever perfect.
That's correct.
We try to mitigate that as much as possible. Being that this is a surface parking lot, we're not going to be looking as though we're gonna be digging a whole lot. I think maybe where the retaining walls might come in, we may run into some issues, but we try to make sure that we don't have them. So the parking lot is always an easier thing to do than building a building,
Yeah.
which becomes more invasive to the ground.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But this is a special place that you do things, so you
Yeah.
just mentioned the word digging, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so we watch what we dig though, and
Yeah,
how we
right,
dig.
right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The unforeseen part, what makes the difference. I mean, I would think, so when you bid for something, if I'm the bidder, 3 or 5 of us bidding, we cannot bid for what we think, you know, figuring out our whole construction company, equipment and everything, putting the package together. And then normally I think the problem we might have or see is the unforeseen part, so I just was bringing
Yeah,
this.
so the university
Project is a
has,
special project.
the university has within their bidding process an X amount of percentage that we have to set aside for contingencies, just for that situation. And in this process, it will not be any different. We will make sure X amount of that $1.5 million is set aside for that.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about this project because I think this project will set the pace of the bigger picture that we're gonna do. And I always worry about the unforeseen part.
Yeah.
Because that's where the trouble is at the unforeseen. I would think so, I'm not sure.
You know, things that you might have to worry about are if there's any kind of construction delays, usually if it's weather or anything else. That always gets into, you know, when a contractor is bidding, that might be an issue. Where we can get a better pricing is that we don't set a unrealistic time frame, because what they'll do is they'll just, you know, you set it on, they boost their price up. So we will work with the university to make sure that and with SSFM, what is a reasonable time frame? What kind of delays we will expect up there? We can find that out by working with the staff to try and minimize. Like I said, it's not gonna all be perfect, but we'll
Yeah,
try and minimize
I
it.
understand that, but to make things perfect or for the future,
Yeah.
then we need to work, you know, I guess phases, step, the first phase or second phase, whatever you wanna call it. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle.
Question, Hannah?
I see that the existing dorms are to be relocated. What's the time frame for that relocation?
When we start the construction, we will have to relocate them. Now, everybody says that it has to be, it should be relocated. We're looking at all kind of alternative and options. If you've walked into them, it's probably gonna cost you more money to relocate them. You know, move them, take them apart, and rebuild it again. It is not in its best shape. So there are other alternatives that might be easier for the viz. You know, anything from containers to modular, things that you can either lease or buy. We'll throw everything on the table, look at that. If it comes down to the point where we should move it and renovate it, then we will do that. But in the bigger picture, who knows if they're gonna be reused again? So that's the other side of it, you know. The cabins we can. The cabins are in great shape.
So and that's within the 1.5 million?
We would have
Yeah.
to look at that, putting that in one point, yeah.
The treatment of them? Another question.
Yes, sir.
Where vehicular access is not managed, limiting parking stalls is not a proven method of managing parking numbers. So if there are already 100 cars on the ground, will the spillover then continue to be the spillover parking area, just below of this?
So, this question was brought up at the Kahu Council. And I do know that Stephanie is looking at ways to manage it on an operational basis. It can be anywhere from reservations to people coming up there. We want to provide access for everyone, from the local community to the visitors to the islands. One way of doing that is limiting the amount of cars that can come up there, you know. So a lot of places do that. And so that's might be some of the hard realities. You know, this place is becoming more and more popular. We don't want to see 200 cars parked up here. I mean, I personally would not want it. It takes away from what's going on up there. But you cannot get away from that. It is already 100 cars coming up on a daily basis. And we want to make sure that, at least for that, we are taking care of that.
If I can add something there, engineering wise, there is a possibility of access from this point to the cabins. So I think, as well as this gravel parking lot that exists now. So I think operationally, whatever they want to do, either block it off or allow access is up to management.
Thank you both.
Leo?
Going back to the cabins itself, you know, do we have numbers in regards to how often those cabins are used? I know I taught out of that cabin with Lelehua folks, but going back to the safety of the cabins itself, and whether or not it's even warranted to have it around, or maybe not bring from 2 to 1 or half of that, you know, and does MKSS still monitors the use of the cabins upside?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the cabins are essentially an extension of the HP lodging facilities, and right now, 2 of the cabins I know are used in whole or in part by Viz staff, because we stay up there for generally 3-day shifts. The other cabins, I'm not sure, Scotty might have some information, but I believe about half of them are.
They use transient residents for overfill from
Right.
HP, and some observatory workers prefer to be isolated down in the cabins for sleeping purposes and request the cabins.
So do we have numbers in regards to how many are actually up there at the most during a period of 1 week or so?
Right now, there's a total of 16 rooms. There's 4 bedrooms per cabin, and I would say roughly a third to a half are in use on a weekly basis.
We're also looking at, when we have to remove those existing construction cabins, the old ones that Kurt was mentioning, that we may be looking at using we're probably not going to relocate them because they're just so old, they don't need clothes. We may be looking for the cabins to put some of the functions in those construction cabins into those existing
Yeah.
units.
I would want to see those kinds of stuff happening instead of putting up more buildings. Is really to take it down and then utilize what you have, knowing that, you know, and I used to work for IRTF at 88-inch telescope, so I kind of know how MKSS works in terms of the numbers. So if we can really consider those spaces. Mahalo nui.
Yeah, those are nice cabins, and yeah, we'd like to see them stay.
Roger?
Yeah, is water runoff being addressed with the design of this parking lot?
Yes. We haven't looked into that yet, as we haven't got into detailed design, but yeah,
It can
there's.
get really bad up there.
Right, so, you know, this access road is actually, I guess, covering up, this outlet here that's coming this way. So with our project, we'll probably need to divert it this way.
I'm not looking just runoff that's existing there, but the runoff you're creating with that parking lot. It's a
So-
big catchment area.
Right, so we'll probably use some shallow dry wells. I know there's a couple out there currently, and talking with Stuart, they don't see any problems with maintaining and, you know, cleaning them out once in a while. So I think with how we lay out the parking lot, we'll handle drainage at each tier so it doesn't build up.
Will those drainages be able to handle hazardous waste, you know, from the wells, the cars, drip and all that?
You know, we'll have to look into that, but yeah, we'll probably filters or, you know, inlet filters.
I think those are good questions. Is this on?
I think it's
I don't think I need it. I think those are the good questions. One of the things I think we need to understand, everybody, is that this is a conservation district, and so compliance with Chapter 343 and 13.5 Hawaii Administrative Rules is going to be involved. So this is a very introductory part of the process. We're looking at the design. Any approval we give is contingent on the fact that it will comply with Chapter 13.5, and so those issues will be raised as far as archaeology, cultural, the more detailed questions that Roger's addressing as far as drainage. All of these agencies will be looking at this project and allowed to comment on the draft EA, and those answers must be complied with in the final EA before any permit is granted. So I think it's important that we understand that we're not going to have answers to all those questions today. What's before us today is a design a concept that we will approve, and if we do approve it, it would be pending compliance with those rules. So I just want to make sure everybody understands where we are in the process.
So, Chairman, can I make a?
Sure.
Added mention is that the process that we're going through right now is to make sure that we secure a contractor. The contractor cannot start until the EA is completed. So the EA will go concurrently with the work that is going on here. And as you know, the EA process will probably take longer than the process of us doing the design, putting it out to bid, and awarding it to the contractor. The contractor will have to understand that he cannot move ahead, or no notice can be moved ahead until the EA has been filed and a FONSI has been given.
And the CDP is issued.
Yeah.
But if I may, I think moving forward between that now and then, is that some of the questions that I raised with some of the proposals, some of the details will need to be part of that being, before it be brought here in terms of the size of trucks. I think Uncle Herring made mention of that, yeah, in terms of the hali and carrying some of the things up there, you know, those are the things I look at. You know, but so I don't want it to get too far, and it comes here, and well, I don't know what the size of the truck is, you know. I don't know if that's here or what.
Are you talking about delivery trucks?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, the delivery trucks will not, that's not designed for
Okay.
delivery trucks. Those will just be using the main road to get up.
No, in terms of the building, the construction, and all of those pieces.
Oh, those kinds of.
You know what I mean? Because there was one proposal came, and I had a question about the size of the truck that they'll carry all of the equipment for the building. And nobody answered my question, so I opposed it. And I think that's the kind of stuff, for me, I want to know those things in the design, or in the planning, or in the contract, you know,
Sure.
those kind of stuff, yeah?
Yeah, and that will certainly, at any request, at any time you want us back here, because the process of design will always continue. It always continues until the final FONSI is given, right? So, I mean, comments can be made. We will take the comments that we've heard today, put that in our process of even putting this design together. But at least when we go out for the EA, we have a design that is pretty much, how should I say it, it's not final, but at least it has a direction to it, so that, and can be built. And we'll make sure that in the EA process, that we answer those kind of questions, so that, you know, my idea of a good EA is no comments back, right? So we try to, as much as possible, get all those comments inside before we can move forward.
Any other on the committee?
Hello, I know I came in late, but I just wanted to make sure, if it wasn't talked about, that if you look at the bottom side of this, not too far from where the parking lot will be, is where all the ahinahina are. And if you stand there today, you notice that where the parking lot will be, you're uphill of where the ahinahina are. And if you notice the wind flow that comes, it goes back and forth. So you also have to take into consideration whatever on those cars and with those people, because now you don't have just dirt, which could catch seeds. It'll allow it to flow. And there are already invasive species that are threatening ahinahina in that area. And ahinahina is an endangered species, and they're in full bloom right now. And there's a lot of them there. And so this is a huge thing, especially if you're gonna look at the water flow like he was talking about, not just for oil and all of that, but what else is gonna go down there? Because it's not that far. You know, the visitor center is almost a line, almost flat with that, but where that parking is, it's like maybe, yeah, and so it has that downward effect. You know, if the wind was to come that way, and say someone just came from someplace with choke seeds and grass, and they don't have time to clean their yard, and they have all that grass under their truck, whatever, that could possibly be down there, and we don't need to be battling more invasive species. There's already a lot up there. And so that's one thing.
I think that's a very good comment, and these are absolutely the types of things that are going to have to be addressed in the EA. Is that all of these things about runoff, wind direction, impacts of what is proposed, impacts of the uses. But that's a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have another one. I might be late, but I don't think it's late because it hasn't started yet. But listening to you guys and what's been brought up, it sounds like even after this is done, there's going to be a limit of access to the mountain anyway. And so, as a younger generation, to me, knowing that you're going to put a cap on that, it makes absolutely no sense to me as to why you're gonna open this now. Why don't you just put a cap now? Because creating that will create more of a negative effect for my generation, our kids, I think, if you're gonna make a cap anyway. Because you're saying 100, and you're saying you don't know about the overflow parking, and you're thinking you're gonna only allow whoever first come, first serve. I don't know how you're gonna look at that, or how you're gonna make that cap. But to hear those things being said, it's like a slap in the face to me and my generation and my kids, because then that allows for, that's a cap now, but if this takes up in another 10, 20 years, we're gonna make another one. And that's not what we're looking for the mountain, I don't think we're looking to expand and make a lot more parking up there. And so if you have that mindset, then it really doesn't make sense to me to spend this money and to alter this terrain, as minimal as it might be, if you already have that mindset of managing the mountain and making a cap on it.
I don't believe anybody has suggested a cap. That's not part of this proposal.
Okay, so
And
how
it's-
is the overflow parking gonna work then?
Well, I think that was one of the questions that Anna asked, is how that would take place. I think the proposal here is to try to address the parking capacity that exists today. It's not looking at an expansion. If there are expansion plans, that would have to be done under another proposal, under a different concept. In fact, today, if you stay for the rest of the agenda, you'll find that we're looking at other aspects, which is returning parts of the managed lands to the state. But this proposal is only to address the existing parking that's there now. There's no proposal by this board or anybody to this board to cap the use of the mountain or the use of the visitor center at any number. So that's, I'm sorry if that's implied, but that's not the case. All right, that's not being discussed, not being suggested.
So if there's 200, then that's fine, and they'll park on
We're
wherever.
we're not going to discuss capacity of the people. All we're trying to do is with this money was to address the existing people that are parking and where we can get them and put them in a safe manner so that they're not crossing the road. And that's it. Is it a final solution? No. It doesn't talk about the expansion of the visitor center or any other thing. It just talks about trying to get the people off the road into a safe position so they can get back and forth without crossing the road in a dangerous situation. So please understand that we're not proposing any caps. So thank you.
Can it be let known in the minutes that I think that the safety of the Ahina Hina, because that is our environment, is more important than the safety of people who decide to put themselves in that environment?
Okay, your comments are noted. Ma'am, you got a question?
Hi, I'm Debbie Ward. I wanted to ask if there were any alternatives to hardening the whole surface. There may be some more permeable ways of dealing with the parking situation so that it's not just asphalt. And so I'm curious to know whether the engineers have any other suggestions with regard to that. And the other concern I have
Why
has to
don't we
do with-
answer that one first, and we'll come back to you, all right?
We can look at, I mean, there are, and we have done other, how should I put it, parking lots that have are more sustainable, they're more permeated. The two things we have to take into consideration is, one, the cost of it. And the second thing that we have to take into consideration is the, how should I put it, the use of the parking spaces. Many of the parking spaces that, in the last project that I did, we had permeable parking. The parking was not as constant, you know. People would come, they would stay. It was a housing project, you know, so it's not like they were moving a whole lot. So that's the other consideration we would have to take into. But there's always, you know, looking at alternatives. We're trying to be as sustainable as possible. So that's, you know, what we're showing here is basically a area that we would like to have the parking. Whether it's an asphalt parking, permeable parking, concrete, anything, we will still continue to look at that possibility.
I think when you review the document, that would certainly be a comment that you could make on the draft EA, and then allow the consultant to respond so that you'd have an official response.
Well, hopefully it would be incorporated into the
Well,
draft.
you had another question.
And my other question is, I accompanied Holly Mackel down there about 20 years ago, who, around the area below the visitor center, and there were a tremendous number of archaeological points that she pointed out to us. And I'm just wondering whether that's been taken into consideration before this design was.
Well, clearly in the 343, an archaeological inventory survey, and in compliance with that, with the preservation plan, burial treatment plan, data recovery plan, all of that would have to be complied with prior to the granting of the funds, if the 343 was going forward. So all that archaeology will need to be done as part of the 343.
Yeah, just to expand, we have already a consultant that will help us with all of that. And once we show him the area that we're planning on looking at, then they'll start doing all of that work.
Anna?
I wonder if the previous speaker would care to give her name so that our minutes can reflect who made the comments.
Right.
My name is Mamo Bizilla.
Thanks. Could you say again?
Mamo Bizilla, Beezilla.
Thank you.
I just would like to make a comment, and it's been brought up before at the Kahu Mauna Council. In the upper left, existing stalls to be used for ADA and permitting process. I think this is kind of an inflammatory message, because what it means is that the people with the permits, those people who can drive up and service the tourists or whoever's gonna go up there, they're reserved parking for them. The local people, whoever, have to park in the lower unit, and some of them may be not quite disabled, because then they can go to the ADA. But if you run out of ADA spots and so on, so my thought is, it's not what we're doing right now. Because right now, we just want to approve the concept. But we should be thinking, and maybe even eliminating that kind of stuff, is permittees for the permits. Because that sends a message that we're putting them in front of the local people.
It's a good comment, and you can consider that.
Yeah, Tom had asked us, and it's a management issue, in the future though, he is right, it's probably not gonna be there. But how it's used is really, concerns of the management, how they wanna use it.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
Just a clarification on Tom's question. Operationally, at night, we're closing the parking lot in front of the visitor station, which is what we're talking about there. So actually, no one other than handicapped can park there, and the tour vans only use it in the afternoon on their way up to the summit.
Okay.
So there's not really, depending on the time of day, it's not really a discrimination between different types of people other than handicapped.
Okay, it's a time-critical situation though. No matter whether you're a tourist or someone who wants to do a ceremony or who want to look at the setting of the sun, there is a certain key time, and everybody wants a time from 4 to 5:30 because they need to acclimatize to go into the visitor area. Okay, and so primarily, the permittees all have to go through that process to feed their people and to let them acclimatize. But how about the local people who need to do the same thing? They're all fighting for prime time from 4 to 5:30.
I think that's a good question, but it really is an operational question. And I think that's something we have to look at. What these consultants are here really for is structurally what we're going to build, how the stalls are used, and hours of operation, who uses them. I think those are all important issues, but probably not pertinent to this particular discussion. And it's something that management is going to have to consider as they go forward. But thank you for your comments. Yes?
I think it is kind of important though, because if you look at the size of the people that come with tours, their vehicles are larger than your normal vehicle. So that would define how wide the lines would be. So I think it is also important for them on their designing side.
They have to consider that, yes.
Why don't you just change the word permit to reserve parking? That way it's not inflammatory as to permittees. Because it can be for staff as well as.
Or this parking lot can operate as it does now, where it's just first come, first serve, and if the tour vans don't have space, they can come down here if they want to. Just a suggestion, but
Right.
the point is that we need the ADA parking.
Right, no, I think the ADA is what we have,
Yeah.
but as far as the other, it's an operational
Yeah.
issue. And we're not going to discuss operational issues here today, because that's not what this is about. But those are good valid points, and I'm glad you brought them up so that the staff can hear them, and as they go forward, they can address those, because if it comes up this early in the conversation, then clearly they're going to come up later. So thank you for your comments. Yes, sir, Rob?
But just confused about your comments about Ahina Hina, the Silver Sword, and maybe Fritz can. The Ahina Hina is actually the Hina population is above the proposed parking.
It's uphill of
It's
all
uphill, it's not
planned
downhill.
parking.
Yeah, it's up here.
Sorry, I'm
Which is
looking at it
uphill,
wrong.
so.
Yeah, it's up here.
Okay, where's the existing,
The existing Viz is right
and
there.
where's the existing road right now?
Existing road is right here.
So this is the
Oh,
Silver
okay.
Sword
The
enclosure
Silver
up
Sword
here.
enclosure
It's
is
hard
up
when you
there.
look against the wall, sorry.
And that's down the other side.
All right, great, thank you. Are there any other questions about the conceptual design of this parking lot? All right, given the caveats that we've already mentioned about the compliance with Hawaii Administrative Rules 13.5 and Conservation District rules, and then Chapter 343, which includes flora, fauna, noise, dust, traffic, archaeology, cultural, and all the other issues that have to be addressed. What we're looking at is conceptual approval today of this parking lot. And that.
I just wanted to add that Kahu Kumana did meet last week, which Kurt mentioned, and that they did express that there needs to put this project in the bigger picture. So the ingress egress is just part of the bigger picture of what we're going to be doing with the visitor information station. You know, what it's expanded, what its function is. They also expressed that when we move forward in the second phase of this new viz, is that we have to look in terms of how are we going to manage and control and not increase the number of visitors to the lot. That was something they really expressed, so that answers your question. Okay. And that we need to, that Imiloa needs to be part of this whole discussion when we move forward with this visitor information station vision, and that more importantly, that the community needs to be part of this whole overall design and discussion. And so those are what Kahu Kumana's comments were. Other than that, they realize that the safety needs to be addressed through this plan.
All right, any question about process before we vote? I want to make sure we're very clear about what we're voting on, not implying or assuming anything we're not. We're looking at a conceptual approval for this proposed parking lot.
Greg, do we have a role downstream in this whole process beyond the bay?
Well, definitely when it comes to the CDUP, then this board can, and the EA.
Yeah, so this is not our only bite at the apple. I think what we're telling the consultants is that we approve of the direction they're going so they can go out and talk with contractors and have a footprint, have a concept of ingress, egress that will work. All right?
And consideration of perhaps other medium instead of asphalt, that's part of that, okay.
Well, that'll all come up in the EA, yeah, and that'll all come back to us, and we will be a commenter on that EA. All right, with all of those caveats, can I get a motion to approve this conceptual design? Harry has a motion, do I have a second? Roger? All right. Any other questions before we provide this conceptual approval? Okay, all in favor of approving the concept as presented by our consultants, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, none opposed, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe.
We look forward to working with you as we go forward.
Yeah, I hope to be able to come in front of the board as a work session to discuss some of the issues that you may have.
We're gonna do this, let's see here. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just keep that here. All right, the next item is the consideration of withdrawal of lands from the Mauna Kea Science Reserve. In our packet today is a copy of the governor's press release and proposals to the university regarding management of the mountain. Hold on a second. Thank you. In it, the governor had made 10 recommendations to the university. And one of those, item number 8, says voluntarily return to the full DLNR jurisdiction of lands over 10,000 acres, not specifically needed for astronomy. This is an interesting proposal, and creates several questions for us that I think we need to consider as a board. Every member who sits here, I'm sure, is spent countless hours reviewing the comprehensive management plan, the cultural resource management plan, the natural resource management plan, decommissioning plans, invasive species plan, et cetera, et cetera. All of those plans were for the 11,000 acres that the university currently manages. The question now becomes, if we return 10,000 or more acres to the DLNR, is what is the status of those plans? How do they comply? What is enforced? What do those plans relate to? And that is, I think, a very important question. Those plans were created by the community with hundreds of hours and dozens of meetings to create these plans. And are we to disregard those plans now and apply them only to the lands in the astronomy precinct, which is less than 1,000 acres? And I have no answers. I have nothing but questions as we go forward. And I think what I would like to see come out of today's discussion is maybe a recommendation, or at least a series of questions that we can address to our body. We advise the chancellor and the president of the university, which is then the board of regents, and they're in negotiations then apparently now with DLNR about what's going to happen to these lands. And I don't think we can solve all those problems today, or frankly any of those problems today, but I think we can raise questions that will affect the way that we manage the lands that we control. And I have many questions about what the applicability of all these plans will be if we return 10,000 acres to the state. Will they in fact be comprehensive management plans if we are only managing a road up to the mountain and up to the astronomy precinct? So I would like to hear your thoughts. Hannah, since you were here from the beginning, probably longer than most because of your involvement with Kahu Mauna, about development of these plans.
I would imagine, regardless of the numbers of acres addressed by the plan, that they would be comprehensive in nature. That all of the elements that are discussed in the plans, covering those 10,000 plus acres, would also be discussed in this reduced scope. So first of all, I think that the comprehensive nature of the plans would remain.
How are the balance of the lands going to be managed?
Is it not anticipated that they would return to the Department of Land and Natural Resources?
Under which rules?
Well, perhaps Mr. Louis Kwan can answer that. I don't know what rules that would be under.
I guess what I'm concerned with is if you're on one side of the road, you're managed by a certain set of rules and a certain agency, and then you pass a certain line, and now you're managed by someone else. Are the rules the same? The fact that you know, these rules have been adopted, do they continue to apply to those lands? Jim?
Not rules, they're actually a plan. But the company's management plan is, right now, by the definition of the plan itself, it only applies to UH management areas.
Which is 11,000.
Which is 11,000 acres. But again, once the give back goes through, that's going to change. And unless you revise the plan, and it's not us that revise the plan. The plan was approved by the land board, so it applies to the state. But in the language of the plan, it applies only to the UH managed land. So if we don't change that language, or they don't change the language, it'll only apply to the lands that we retain. So the remainder, unless they choose to apply the CMP and the sub-plans to those lands, will not be subject to it. It doesn't stop them, however, from actually managing their lands as they would pursuant to the CMP. I think the principles they adopted would also continue, or should continue anyway. I think that the time they spent reviewing, the time we spent putting it together, I think would be wasted if they didn't. But again, depending on what their policies are, I think we'll have to help them, find the right direction. And again, Greg's right, it doesn't make sense, having, the left side do it one way and the right side not, and again, I can't see the state actually abandoning the plan. I don't see that at all. I think what has to actually happen, and that's one reason we're meeting with them and negotiating, I think it's to help them understand what the overall management for Mauna Kea should be. And again, I think everybody's in agreement that it should be comprehensive. I think everybody's in agreement that it should continue. They're gonna have to figure out on their own how they apply the plan if they want it applied formally. We anticipate, you asked what rules are gonna be taking it back. We understand that they have at least preliminarily looked at taking it back under the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve. Unfortunately, the CMP has not been adopted for the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve. They may have to be looking at revisions to the Forest Reserve rules as a result of that. Additionally, another means for them to continue the CMP is to actually have it as a condition of the withdrawal from our lease and the reposition of that in the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve by executive order. I think the AG's, Attorney General's office, can have the possibility of having a condition where, under the EO, certain things also pass besides the land, and that may include the CMP as well. So again, I mean, these are all the things I think the discussions between the university and DLNR is already undertaken.
So, well, right now, forest reserve rules apply to all forest reserve, regardless if it's Mauna Kea, Hihikino, Hanalei, or whatever. They're the same. Is that correct, Rob?
That's correct.
Right, that's correct, right?
There are specific,
Yeah.
in some cases, specific
yeah.
rules.
I think
So-
a few specific ones, it
Right.
normally applies to all
Oh,
forest
right.
reserves.
So DLNR will have to make a decision whether or not they wanna have specific rules for these lands, which, but once it goes back into the forest reserve, there is no boundary around, the boundary that's currently the science reserve is gonna disappear, and it's just gonna merge into the forest reserve. So where would that CMP end once it gets put into that whole forest reserve? If they decide they wanna decide to keep managing those lands under the CMP, they're gonna have to determine where that boundary is gonna be. And they have to decide whether or not they want to use the CMP for management, because now they're making an exception for this particular parcel compared to the rest of their forest reserve lands. Right? So there's a lot of things they have to think
Yeah,
about.
well, all forest reserves can be managed in different ways, or what they need to produce out of those forest reserves. So that one could be managed under the CMP to the regular forest reserve rules. I don't see any problems with that.
Okay, that's
But the
possible.
question is, if they have the monies and the time and manpower to actually manage it like that, that's where the problem normally is. It's not the rules.
So, there's a lot of things that DLNR needs to really consider, is whether or not they want the CMP. They want to continue to use the CMP as their management guide and document.
So Roger, understanding how big the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve is, the state could create, the DLNR could create a subset of the entire Mauna Kea Forest Reserve, specifically for the returned lands, correct?
It could be created as a different forest reserve, yes. If it's created as a special management unit, then we've got problems. Because there are no rules for special management units.
So
So there
if
you
you-
end up with no rules again.
Right, and part of the problem actually applying the CMP to the greater forest reserve, as Stephanie's implying, is that a lot of the base studies that we did for the CMP originally have not been done on the greater forest reserve, right?
That's correct.
Given that we're an advisory body, I think what we ought to be thinking about is what would we like to share with the Chancellor and the President of the University and the Board of Regents as they initiate and have these discussions with DLNR about these lands. Rob, you had a comment or a question?
I think, I'm not sure why they're going to the forest reserve, because to me, it would make more sense to expand the NARs up there. And then you have a higher set of rules, and then you could overlay the CMP on top of that as long as they didn't conflict with the NAR's rules. And then you don't have this subs, because you have, even if they do put it in forest reserve, you still have this boundary because you've got the NARs up there too. So now you still have three, now you have three sections, three jurisdictions. You can have the UH lands, lease lands, the NARs, and then now a forest reserve kind of stuck in the middle of all that. Whereas if they expanded the NARs over, you would just end up with the two, and the CMP, the Comprehensive Management Plan aligns very nicely with NAR's rules. And so to me, that would be, I don't know what Roger thinks about that, but that makes more sense to me.
You gotta realize what NARS was created for then, initially, to protect unique ecosystems within the state of Hawaii. We do have NARS up there that do protect areas. Once you put NARS rules in place, then a lot of your activities are restricted up there. You can't do a lot of things they want to. Forest reserves are put in place in the state to provide, number one, water for everybody. That's why it was initially created as forest reserves.
So Rob, I think the state has also looked at expanding as an option, expanding NAR as well for Mauna Kea. Again, I don't think they shared with us specifically some of the issues they had with expanding the current NAR for Mauna Kea Ice Age or for the layout. But I think part of it is the manpower, it's the resources available to NAR at this point, as one of them.
It seems that there is so much difficulty moving forward on well thought out and properly proposed initiatives that the speed at which we're all being asked to move on this is remarkable to me. I heard the word executive order used earlier, and I think it was in the context of the Mauna Kea Forest Reserve the use of the CMP could be imposed upon it by use of executive order. Did I hear accurately?
The executive order is actually to put the return lands back into the forest reserve.
So that has already been done. This represents.
Actually, that's probably the last thing that will be done. That act itself it has to go to the land board. They would actually have to do a survey of the return lands. There's a bunch of things that would have to actually happen. So the EO is not to put a condition on it. The EO is to actually transfer it from one jurisdiction to another. That's how they move the lands around. The condition I was talking about would be a condition under the EO itself.
And that transfer would only occur after exhaustive study.
Well, no, the governor's timeline is to have the lands withdrawn by the end of the year.
Remarkable.
Well, there's a correction here, excuse me, okay. So the approval, they want the approval from the land board prior to the end of the year. Yeah. So, but the actual EO may not happen for a year or two after that. And that's the way it's actually been. I mean, Roger knows, sometimes it takes years to actually finally to kick out the EO. The surveys take, we're talking about an immense piece of land to be surveyed.
Yeah, and for forest reserves, it takes a public hearing to do it. It takes public input.
So I'm wondering, who is the governor talking to in regards to some of these things that he wants? And I think that's one of my questions. And what is the timeline for that, especially if some, our decision is supposed to be made by the end of the year, at least for the first phase, who are the people he's talking to? Not the
No
fast,
idea.
huh? No?
Is it,
No, no.
Greg, is it
No,
a
no.
foregone conclusion that these lands would revert back to DLNR,
It is a statement by the governor
right?
that he's asked the university to take these
Think
10 significant actions related to enhanced stewardship in general. So it's the
And that's
governor's
one of
request.
them.
That's right, that's one of them. I find, you asked, Leo asked a good question. I find something, to be quite honest, I think is very offensive in what the governor says. He says, the governor said the state of Hawaii must change the way it exercises responsibility for Mauna Kea and the proposed to change the management in the entire summit, all of which is state land, and to bring cultural voices into the leadership structure. He announced the formation of a Mauna Kea Cultural Council, which will work with the Board of Department of Land and Natural Resources and the Governor's Office to ensure that all acts from here forward are sensitive and observant of the host culture. How does that interact with Kahu Mauna and the work they've done for decades? What is he saying about the work that you've done? Where's the control and the cultural voice going to come from for the mountain now? Will it be this island?
Originally, that's why I say the 5 district. Everybody failed to realize this island, and I think I reported a couple of meetings back. But what I say, I don't remember, I don't record. I only gonna tell one time. The 5 district, this island is special. I understand with everybody, but we need to evaluate ourselves individually. I talk about as a Hawaii. 2 generations coming through our culture and all. We lost it along the way and all that. But I understand everything, but we need to do it together. When we get duplications, that's where we have problems. So, Kahukumana, or with the board now presently, when the astronomy and everything started, which 2014 was 50 years ago, if everybody get questions, go try revisit. I think the problem was when we studied this board and we studied Kahukumana to put people on a, I'm not sure if I was one of them at the time, recommending when I remember Hannah Springer, and I'm not sure if Rob was on the board and all that. It was important because I knew some of the cultural practitioners in the 5 districts. That's why I mentioned that. And my family come from 4 of the 4 districts. My mother's side, my father's side, my in-law, and all that. But it's communication. If we go back and look the record when Kahukumana was formed and when we were formed, it's a communication. When the new board member come in, I think he should be get orientation. Let him know what's happening. And his input, how we can make things work good, and with the whole community putting together, and with people with the president. I think we're still on the right page right now. It's just to put everything together and try to help it. But that's the way I feel, looking at things and doing things, but it's right. Whatever is here, whatever we're doing, and I'm really concerned who they're talking to, like what you were saying. I really like know who they're talking to, but the board and what you were saying, you have 1,000 questions. I have a lot of questions too, but how we can make that happen as we move forward, starting today.
You know, Harry, and I have deep concerns because I really respect the amount of work that you and your colleagues have put in and the work you do. And now, what I read here is that your voice will only affect less than 10% of the mountain.
That's correct.
And your mana'o will not be sought for the management of over 10,000 acres. That input will come from a different group. And how is that going to work, in reality? If I'm on one side of the road, Kahukumana is going to make recommendations about cultural aspects of any proposal, but on the other side of the road, it's going to be another group. And I'm offended.
I'm offended too, and I understand all that. But right now, everything is in place. And you ask him, this is me. I would give back the land, continue the management, and make sure we listen to everybody and put it together, like DLNR, the 10,000 acres. You know, we get something going. I see, yeah, second string to try to be a first string or something like that, whatever it is. But to me is, if we get a plan, I really like them, or whoever at the table, I really like let them know. You're not gonna know unless you participate in everything, and you're right. And you say this side is this side, and that's why I like no. And when the who was saying who they talking to, that's my concern, who they talking to. Then if they come to this meeting and you know, they tell us we're not doing this and that, we take the input, we try to work it so that we can move on and make sure everybody is represented in this whole process. Yeah.
Seems to me the recommendations or mandate or whatever it is, 10 Commandments, are directed toward the university. We're not the university. We're an advisory group.
That's right.
And we can advise the Chancellor and the President and the Board of Regents in any manner that we see fit. And if your recommendation is that we keep the lands, then we can recommend that. Whether that'll happen or not,
Yeah, I don't know, because now that you told me
this
that
board,
I'm gonna get 10%, I want 100% to make the problem solve
right,
with everybody. You get 100%.
right.
Now you just will tell me 10%, or take back the land. No give them nothing. Because we already, I think I did 50%. I'm not sure if I did 50. But I think I did 50. Now you tell me 10%. No give them back. I don't know if I'd like to say, but me, I will vote no. No give them back.
Well, we're an advisory group.
I know we're an advisory group. I understand all that.
And
But
if
I
our
want to make
advice to
things
the,
happen.
and I have no problem, in fact,
Okay.
I share your opinion that if our advice is that we think it's a bad idea, then we should say that, and we should say why. And if we think that, okay, they're gonna take it back anyway, then here are issues that you need to tell us. We're about to embark on redoing our plan, right? It's a 5-year review, we've gotta go through this. We need to know, where does that plan cover? If it is only the UH managed lands, then the plan might look somewhat different. Because I think a big element of that is then, how are we gonna interact with DLNR's plans? Because there's an interface, and we can't just close our eyes and operate independently. We've gotta say, okay, how are we gonna work together on this?
Well, I take a different view.
Good.
My question from the beginning was, why did the Science Reserve need all those 11,000 acres of land to manage? If this is the amount of land, the footprint in this, the red hashed marks, is the amount of land that it takes to accomplish the intention of astronomical investigation from the Mauna, then this may be this may be the acreage that comports with the management capabilities of the University of Hawaii. So I just think that the reserve was too big to begin with in the first place. And the smaller acreage seems like a more manageable acreage for the university to handle, keeping the intended uses of the management area in mind. I've walked around up there a little bit, and those vast tracts of land at that high elevation might be better suited for management under a forest reserve or a NAR. But I think that we should consider, there's an acquisitive nature among individuals and agencies. And that's part of what I see playing out here, is agencies jockeying for domain, but not necessarily analyzing the management according to their capability to manage.
So, Hannah, I think if you look at the history of the plans, and the permits and the leases that have gone in for Mauna Kea, that I think from the very beginning, it was only anticipated that astronomy would be used, impacting, only a small portion of the reserve. But the greater part of the reserve was actually meant, it was very clear after the 2000 master plan, that the remainder of the reserve was meant to be a buffer, a scientific and cultural buffer for the summit area. And again, it may have been something beyond the ability of either the state or the university to manage as well as it could be. But I think at least since 2000, the 2000 master plan, I think the university has been trying to do that. I think they've done it. We've come a long way since then with the CMP and the subplans. And again, I think that's what we're talking about. I think where we are right now is where we wanted to be back in 2000. And I guess the concern here is that are we just actually going backwards by, abandoning the CMP to a large part of the reserve now? I think the larger part of the reserve was meant to be the buffer. If the state can maintain that larger part that's returned, at least to keep it in the same condition it's now, with or without the CMP, then I think they should deserve a chance at it. But I don't see the state or DLNR at this point backing down from the return of what they say a substantial portion. I think the initiative is pretty firmly embedded at this point.
One thing I would say, Ken, I don't think, you're talking about different agencies want to exert control. I think the university is probably thrilled with the transfer, all right? I don't work for the university, all right? I work for the community here. I mean, we're all volunteers. My concern is for the mountain, all right? Now, I think you're absolutely correct. The university is far better equipped to deal with only the astronomy precinct. And I don't have a problem with that. My problem really falls, and it sounds funny coming from the Howley sitting here, is the cultural aspects and having a different board advisoring the cultural management of the mountain on our island by another group, and how we segment Kahu Mauna and say that now your guidance will only apply to 880 acres, all right? Because we now have this other group that's going to advise DLNR and BLNR about the balance of the mountain. And that's what makes me very nervous. As far as the transfer of the state, I think the university is probably thrilled to death that now that all they have to do is manage this area. Because now Stephanie and her staff don't have to worry about this land. As Tim says, it's never intended for astronomy use. It's a buffer. But I worry about the public and the community and what's going to happen on the mountain and how it's going to be managed. You know, Roger, you're going to have the staff and the budget to manage another 10,000 acres?
Right now, if you look at Mauna Kea Forest Reserve, it's over 67,000 acres. If you add another 10,000 acres, it's the largest forest reserve in the state.
Anyway, those are my concerns. I would not be quiet.
What was the designation before it was part of the science?
It was forest reserve.
So it was there in the first place? So it would go back to where it was previously?
Go back to where it was.
I would just say that if this cultural concern is so mighty, then hiring should have been done along the same timeline that Fritz was hired to implement the Natural Resources Management Plan. That has been an outstanding concern from Kahu Mauna that has been voiced as soon as Fritz was hired. That we hear the rhetoric about concern for the culture, but the university has done no better engagement and making good their intention and perhaps promise to treat the cultural resources on par with the natural resources. Kahu Mauna did not form to be an institution of the university. Kahu Mauna formed as a group of people in the community who were concerned about the process as it was unfolding. I'm tempted to suggest that the independence of Kahu Mauna, well, I won't go there, but Kahu Mauna did not form to be an institution or an agent of the university. It formed to be an independent body. And Kahu Mauna or Kukia'i Mauna conform independent of the structure of the university. And so I just think if there is this deep concern and commitment to the culture, then the correlate to Fritz should be hired to work on the cultural resources management plan. And that would be a demonstration of good faith that would make the rhetoric that I'm hearing now a little bit more palatable.
What do you see Kahu Kumano's role in going forward?
I would defer to the members of Kahu Kumano that are either on the phone or present. One of my concerns was brought up at the main meeting is that, in my opinion, we were put in a position of advocating for astronomy on the mountain rather than being the Kahu for the mountain. So the present members can speak better to their role. But if they have the na'au for the Mauna, they don't need the structure of the university to act on that na'au. But in our main meeting, we discussed a little bit that concern, that not only the Kahuku Mauna, but also the Mauna Kea Management Board acts as agents for astronomy and the advance of it, and that maybe there could be a little greater depth to the conversations that we have here, and not be so focused on approving whatever the measure of the day is before us. And then, pardon me for getting a little lively on that part of the discussion, but
I was more interested in how you saw Kahu Kumauna interacting with this new cultural board that's going to advise DLNR and BLNR on the other 10,000 acres.
yeah, and again, I would say.
Is there a role there, or just?
Well, just remembering that we started as a citizens group.
Right.
And it was, through the courtesy perhaps of the university to make the Kahu Kumauna, to integrate it into the comprehensive management plan. But we run the risk when it's whether the governor's hui or the Kahu Kumauna or even the Kukia'i Mauna. Within the Hawaiian community, you have the full range of opinions, attitudes, dispositions, occupations, geographies of origin that you do in any other group. I don't, when we expect there to be a voice that will be harmonious, I wonder if we could ask the same of, what if we had a Portuguese cultural advisory group or a Japanese cultural advisory group? There's a to me, an unrealistic expectation on Na Hawaii to speak in a way that we don't ask anyone else to speak in. But that's in part because of our position on the Aina and the Mauna, so it's understood. But I think, again, the Kahuku Mauna came from the community. I would ask the current members how they would imagine that discourse to unfold, or Uncle Harry.
Doug, you haven't spoken up.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking I could never get away with what the state is apparently trying to do in the sense of requesting this transfer in the absence of a plan. And I just don't know what is going to happen if we go forward with this process. It seems a super fast track. This is with my citizen hat on. I share your concerns. I'm not intrinsically against turning 10,000 acres back to the state. I just want to know what's the plan. And I don't think that's an unreasonable question before I give them my approval to go forward with all of this. And from the astronomy standpoint, you're absolutely right in the sense that it's a small fraction of the 10,000 acres that the observatories actually need to do the science research that we're putting up. So I in principle, don't have an objection to the transfer. I just don't know what we're getting into. I kind of feel like it's almost a double standard in that, the state is the only entity I can think of that can try and do this, initiate this process in the absence of explaining what their intentions are in a clear way, that gives us some confidence that the transfer that they're seeking approval for is gonna meet our expectations. So, anyway, my going in, the answer to your first question is to vote no. And what I'd like to see is a plan for what they intend to use the land for. And I'm not against the transfer. I simply want to hold the feet of the state to the fire as well to get them to take this seriously and address the resource issues. This is a huge resource issue. Are they going to put up legislation to fund this? If not, the plan probably is incredible because it's going to take considerable effort to do what is ostensibly done to the CNP and the process already in place. And I want to echo your comments about the cultural dimension of all of this. I really do feel I've only been on the board for a year, so I kind of fresher eyes than you, and there is an imbalance. We talked about this the last meeting. There's always something coming up within the astronomy community. There's always an environmental report. I would dearly love to see programs and projects founded in the cultural dimension of the future Mauna Kea. And until we have that, there's always going to be this tension that you just eloquently brought to the light once again. Speaking from my standpoint, again from the community standpoint, that balance I don't think is fully represented around the table, and I would strongly support hiring somebody to fill that role and bringing that to the forefront. I'd love to hear programs at every one of these meetings about cultural programs X, Y, and Z. They're just never here, and I keep asking myself, where are they? Why don't we have them?
Roger?
Yeah, what I heard from DLNR is the cultural aspect. They still would prefer that the university manages all the cultural issues on the mountain in the area they have right now. They don't have the resources or expertise to take on that task. You have just the university managing the small little portion, the rest of it just falls to the wayside. Doesn't make any sense at all. That's what they're looking at also. I think they asked definitely for that. That's one issue they got. It goes all the way to enforcement issues. I'm going to manage enforcement up there, the transfer. Mixed management, we have issues about that already. People want to do research up there, whose boundary they're on. They got to pass through one to get to the other. It takes 2 permits to do one project. It becomes a nightmare. It actually is pretty tough. I have to do with that myself up there. Just getting down to nitty-gritty, like who's going to do the meets and bounds survey to do the transfer. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Who's got that money?
I find it odd that the governor has said that the university has not managed the cultural resources, whether you agree or disagree, but then to come back and have DLNR saying that they want the university to transfer the land, but yet continue to manage the cultural resources. Makes no sense.
It's kind of ridiculous because from our perspective, culture is land and land is culture. You can't separate the two. It seems like perhaps some of these duties of the Mauna Kea Cultural Council that the governor is, maybe he needs to really take a look at enlightening himself in terms of some of the cultural practices that are so appropriate at this time to know, especially as a leader of the state. But I think the separation of both the culture and the land is not something that should happen or can happen, because it is one and the same.
We can talk for a long time. We have already.
No.
Yeah. It seems that I'm very type A on it. It seems that I think Tim is correct when he says that in many ways the ship has sailed. The governor's mandated that the 10,000 acres be returned, and they will be. I think as we represent the community and we want to provide guidance to the university through the chancellor and the president as to the issues and concerns that we have that Lou has just raised, is that what would we like to say to the university that they should be saying or asking of DLNR. What's your plan
It's
for
just
the
not
land?
funded,
How are you gonna
credible
fund it?
management plan.
You know, what's the application of the CMP? What's the role of the university? Does the university have a role now at all in those 10,000 plus acres? Or should they?
Even a plan just for the transfer, because if they don't do the transfer right, they'll actually open up the land to all kind of bad stuff can happen. At that point, there's no rules and regs for it. It's to do that.
Ideas, what's the best way to assimilate this information to transfer it? I don't see it very functionally to sit here as a group and come up with a letter today to the governor, but do we want to suggest issues or each draft issues or what?
Well, it sounds like out of the conversation, at least 3 questions that we could inquire of the governor regarding, one, that there be due and proper planning for the transfer and beyond. What are the practicality of the jurisdictional divisions that would result from the proposed transfer? And what is the expense of a meets and bounds survey? And then, I'm not sure quite how to word it, but who's he talking to? And I'm not sure how to word that.
Who's he
Well, who are the individuals and the groups, yeah, in terms of the consultation? He said he consulted, so it almost seems like there was something that was done, but what continues after that?
So that might be, what was the consultation process that led him to make this recommendation?
The 10 Commandments. Yeah.
That's a good question.
They're short, they're concise, and could perhaps help us in our conversation.
Rob?
I think Hannah's questions are wonderful, and I think one thing this board should remember is that this transfer of property is 2 steps, as Tim pointed out. First, the board has to approve it, and then it goes to the governor to execute the executive order. So the board recommends the executive order. So I think this board should work on the board and ask those questions to the board and the board members on this island. You have 2 board members on this island, and there's, and the ship may have sailed, but that board still has to make a decision. And as Roger pointed out, and Harry and I, we were on the board, and Stephanie can confirm this, as a board, we talked about in the past that we don't need these lands, they should be back in DLNR. And DLNR says, well, we don't want them. We don't have the resources to take care of them. And they understand that, the people at the department understand that. And so, and the land board is a mechanism for you to do that, and it may work or may not. And whether that, I agree, I don't know why those lands are in the lease, and maybe they don't need to be there, but again, there needs to be a plan. And I think just those questions could cause pause to the board to have those answers from the executive office, before they make that decision.
Cool.
Yes, Rob's right, I guess, to the extent that this idea of getting back the 10,000 acres is not a new idea. We talked about this years ago, and the issue was resources. I mean, even if you take it out and give it back to DLNR, the staff is not gonna want it if they don't have resources to manage it from their end. So that was always the rub. And I guess the point to me is, the governor can put whatever he wants in his release, but there's a whole process to accomplish it, and it's not solely up to him, unfortunately. And I think, isn't there an EIS required to put lands into forest reserve?
No EIS required.
Just a public hearing?
Just the public hearings.
So, I mean, there's a whole process that needs to be done to just get the lands back. So I'm not sure if, we say the deal is done. There's people that are gonna have input into whether it's done or not, because the process has to be followed. whether it's the public hearings, whether it's the land board, etc. So, you know, the question of resources to me is the big issue. Because even if you have a plan, there still needs to be resources to implement it.
All right, can I get, Hannah, can we treat your questions as a motion?
You may. I'll make the motion that we use these questions as foundational to a letter of inquiry to the governor.
All right. Yes. Question?
Hello. So I'm here as a student and also as a granddaughter of my grandmother who was here years ago finding the telescopes as well. And so what I hear between this discussion is both sides trying to justify why we should give it back, why we shouldn't give it back, and stuff like that. But what I'm hearing is also that this is an advisory board to the president and the chancellor. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So as a student in this situation, suffering from these issues, I hear what you're trying to get from each other, but there's also another avenue of where, because apparently UH has more funding, where UH could make an act of good faith and in a way of accepting their kuleana, having had these lands and whatever happened and transpired on these lands within the past years, and have a motion to provide a certain amount, a certain avenue of giving back, because if you want to be cultural, you try not to give things back any less than you got them, so you're trying to give them back better. And but we're talking about land now, so how can we make it better? And that's a huge future thing. So what I guess I'm trying to say is to propose to these leaders that the university, if it is gonna make that transfer, allow the university to have an avenue to give back to those lands. In perpetuity maybe, I'm not sure, but I think that besides just fighting about this and it should be this or this should be this, I think the UH has funding to be able, I mean, if you have 1.5 million to make a parking lot, you have funding to be able to take care of these other 10,000 acres. And I would also like to mahalo nui everyone who's ever worked on Kahu Mauna. And I think it's very important also to note that it's a volunteer position as well. And thank you all for being volunteers here. But as they meet together yearly, they meet for a total of 22 hours. That's less than 3 work days. And you're putting this immense kuleana on them of having to look back thousands of years and try to also have the vision to look into the future thousands of years and make this decision for this island and for this Mauna. To me, that's huge. I don't think that any of our paid job descriptions entitles that much kuleana. And so hearing that it's such a big, from you, Mr. Moores, about how important that is, it's kind of really, I don't know, I feel like kukai on the floor when I hear that kind of stuff, because it's not the reality of who in here is, you know. And I think, if I'm not wrong, in the planning, there's supposed to be 2 paid positions to work along with Kahu Mauna or to have a cultural side of it. I don't think there is any yet. And so if it really is truly the cultural side that you're trying to push, and I think that's important to visualize. Like, how much can get done in 22 hours? And you have to collaborate with the people from different districts. And then it's really hard to say that this one entity is going to be the funnel for all Hawaiian practitioners coming through. It was hard for me to sit next to this ranger up on the Mauna who's going, oh, can you verify that this person is a cultural practitioner? That's not my kuleana. That's not my kuleana. I have no kuleana to oppose anyone coming up to the Mauna for cultural reasons. And, you know, we're learning a lot more about our culture now, but who's to say that there isn't things that are, like, we think is lost, but it's not lost, and it's continued in generations, and it's not supposed to be known yet. You know? That's not, I don't think that's the board's kuleana to funnel them or to reject them. I think as beneficiaries of people who have been on this land, they have the right to that. Whether or not there's this advisory board, and I don't think anyone really understands the immense kuleana that these people have to go through. And then they have to look to their grandchildren and tell them that they made that decision 20 years later. You know, I think that we really need to relook this situation. Mahalo.
All Yeah.
I'm kind of seeing what this whole thing is giving back the land. You're trying to give, the governor wants you guys to give back, or the UH to give back the land as like a, kind of like a compensation in a way for it not properly being good stewards of the land. And to me, like UH hasn't been good stewards because it's a conservation district. And I brought this up before to Stephanie and other people, that it's a conservation district. Conservation is a science, and not all science is balanced on the mountain. There's 13 telescopes developed and infrastructure developed onto a mountain as a conservation district. And to me, I'm coming from a science background, but I am Hawaiian, and to me it bothers me on that side too as a Hawaiian. But I'm trying to see it from a science background. I have a master's in conservation biology, and I'm trying to understand why you guys are developing so much of a conservation district, and this is really why they're trying to justify giving it back. We can further develop, so it's never really brought up, and I came to the last meeting. TMT is the issue, right? So that's why we're kind of giving back the land, because it's trying to make it better so we can kind of move forward with this TMT project. That's what it kind of feels like. But we're not really fixing the problem. The problem is the mountain is not being managed. Like, it's not really properly being managed. Like, there's some things being looked at, but like I feel like there is some stuff here and there, and it's not really being looked at. So that's kind of where I feel like the land give back is kind of like a compensation the governor wants. But at the same time, like giving back the land, like give back the whole land. Like the way the land should be managed is like an ecosystem. It's a whole system. It's not we manage this part of the ecosystem and that part. We don't like just put up walls and end the ecosystem here. It's one big ecosystem. You manage it as one ecosystem, not like, oh, we're gonna put a astronomy ecosystem here and the rest is not gonna be affected. You put astronomy on the top, gravity, everything flows down, it's gonna affect it. So like, it's science. Like, why are you gonna give back some of it and not manage it? Like, it's one ecosystem. You gotta manage it as one ecosystem. Everything's connected. And to me, I think that's really what everybody wants. That's the compromise, is better management. The whole movement is aloha aina. This is not no telescopes. This is not no science. This is aloha aina. It's like, you gotta kind of manage what we got. It's not pro-sovereignty. This is aloha aina. Like, you're trying to maintain stuff. We're trying to maintain what we have as long as we can. And that's really what the problem really is. And if we give back, or if the UH gives back, who's gonna be maintaining it as a whole, as what it is? You can't just divide it. That's just kind of how I feel, and that's just kind of my opinion. I'm trying to come as a scientist, not as a Native Hawaiian, but as a Native Hawaiian, I do see it as a scientist. Like, my culture is a science. Aloha aina is conservation. And those people standing up on the mountain, to me, are just the same as me. I'm a biologist. They're scientists. The whole mountain is one ecosystem. The whole island's an ecosystem. We gotta start managing it that way, and the governor, maybe he should see it as that. Like, who's gonna manage it? Not just the cultural resources, but the natural resources. You can't just divide a line and just say like, okay, this side of the road, one guy gets it, this side of the road, the other guy gets it. It's like, it's more than just like a permit that I wanna go up to a study and get like 5 different permits. It's more than just that. It's like, you got different management styles on different sides. Who's really managing it? The stewardship just goes down even worse than what it was. So like, that's really what I think we should be thinking about. Like, managing as an ecosystem, not as like a business venture. So that's really my one problem, is it's not a business venture. If you're gonna see it as a science venture, there's all science involved, not just trying to develop astronomy on the mountain, but we're trying to be sustainable. It's an island. We're all in this together. So you just that's kind of where I've been trying to push. I try to push the conversation every time I come around here. So, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Anna?
I think the motion is proper to remain as stated, because that's our letter of inquiry to the executive. But there are a couple of other things that we might consider that I'm just gonna bring up now during discussion, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. With regard to the previous speaker's encouragement for us to think of the Mauna as a whole, regardless of where the lines are drawn, there are a variety of management entities on the Mauna. The name of this body is Mauna Kea Management Board. I wonder if this body might be an, if not the, appropriate vehicle for pursuing a more comprehensive, ecosystem-like consideration of the Mauna. It'll mean our meetings will be longer than 2 hours. But that's a question with regard to the previous speaker's concern. And with the emphasis on management, as long as I've been involved with, since the legislative auditor's report came out in 1998, and we started meeting on this issue, from Na Hawaii, that's always been the concern, is the management of the mountain. And when the media and political voices have made it Hawaiians against science or Kanaka against astronomy, they misrepresent routinely the concerns of the people that have come to the Mauna. The concern has always been the management of the Mauna. May I take a little bit of time to tell a story? My name is Kihalani. There's a story that comes from the time of Kihanui Lulumoku, when he was the paramount chief of this island. And for some of us in the audience, we may know that he had a pool, yeah? And his pool was imbued with tremendous mana, his shell, the conch. It was not always imbued with that mana. He's the paramount chief of the island. He takes the pool to the summit of Mauna Kea so that Lono can put his voice into the pool. The man is the paramount chief of the island, analogous to our governor, Ige, yeah? He takes his pool to the summit. He retreats from the summit with the coming of Lono, and Lono placing his voice into the pool. Even though he was the paramount chief of the island, he still adhered to the protocols, to the kanawai, to the laws of the land of his time. This is what informs me when I look to the Mauna. We look at the Mo'olelo as models for decision-making and behavior. And we see from this account, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but from this account of Kiha, I see my template for behavior. There's a hierarchy, and you may be the paramount chief of the land, but that doesn't mean that you're at the top of the hierarchy. So what we're discussing now is this notion of management, comprehensive, engaged. I was almost going to say righteous, but I won't go there. So I just put that out to this table, that let's have a little conversation about that. Can this body be a linchpin for comprehensive conversations among the different actors on the Mauna? Where are we talking to the NAR, the NAR people, on a regular basis, just for example? Do we have concerns about DHHL or Kohaku Loa? So I just ask us to consider that, keeping in mind the earlier comments. And I think another motion that we might consider is a motion of encouragement to the Office of Mauna Kea Management to hire the positions that are correlate to FITS to implement the cultural resources management plan. So that last bit was just discussion, but I think that if the pleasure of the table is such, I don't think that the motion that's on the table needs to be amended.
Comments?
It has a motion, it's been moved and seconded, yeah?
Yes. So the question really becomes, I guess what we'll be recommending that we just have staff prepare a letter to it would be to the chancellor and the president of the university, and then they would share that with the Board of Regents, and then that would, I assume, eventually get to BLNR, DLNR, as far as, how they negotiate. These are issues and concerns that we have. But we don't really have to vote yes or no. You know, we're only advisory, so we're not voting yes or no on the transfer. So I mean, I know Herring said that he would vote no, and I know Doug said that he would vote, you know, in the negative as well. So really, I think all we can do is say, you know, we're familiar with your press release and the concerns, and we discussed the implications of that, and these are questions that we have and think should be addressed.
I would just, when I was, made the motion, I thought it was a question to the executive office, and I was thinking executive office.
Oh, so you're sending it to the governor?
Oh, that's what I was thinking, because that's the letterhead that we're responding to,
Yeah.
and perhaps with copies as you described, but, you know, that's just what I was thinking.
Or would it be more appropriate for us to ask the university to do it, since we're advisory to the university?
I think it's probably more appropriate to direct it to, as you said, the chancellor and president.
Okay.
Yeah, we should go through, we should go through the chain of command, you know, for us, the chain of command, that the communication doesn't fail, the story, the words are the same going forward. And then when they reach the top, we're supposed to go to the governor, at least we went through the chain of command. I think that's properly.
Good point.
Does it go to the Board of Regents? Because the Board of Regents is responsible for implementing the CMP.
So would it be
It'd
to
be
the chancellor, to the president, and then the board of regents?
It would be to the Board of Regents by the chancellor, by the president.
Yeah, chain of command.
Although if you'd like to draft a letter to the governor, I'd be happy to co-sign that.
I was just putting CC to Hannah's one. The Kihalani's letter put, and it was CC governor. Can we do that? No?
I have no
Following
problem
that
with it,
chain,
Rob.
the hierarchy.
This reminds me of something that, at the very beginning of the formation of this board, and our interim director was Judge Heat. And the first board members, we convened for about 9 months before we became official board, approved by the regents. You are an advisory committee. There are no administrative rules governing this department. Judge Heen told us at that time, and I didn't really understand it completely, but over the years, I came to appreciate it tremendously. And he told us, you do not have authority, but you need to act as if you have authority. Because the whole point of this board was to have a paradigm change of how the mountain was managed from the university and a conduit through the community, and a more holistic approach in managing the mountain. And there's been great strides at that. By acting like you have authority, we have a ranger program on the mountain. By acting like you have authority, we have an agreement, a management agreement with NARS that has helped bring a whole holistic approach to the mountain. So I just want you guys to, I just want to bring that to you to think about that, and that yes, you are a university entity, and I'm probably driving Tim crazy over there, but you know, you are here for a purpose, and I just think back to what Judge Heen said back in the day. So
Thank you, Rob.
Good reminder.
Yeah.
All right, so the letter will be to the Board of Regents through the Chancellor and the President. And copy the governor.
and the board.
Should we authorize Stephanie to draft the letter and then circulate it for comments? Would that be appropriate?
Yes,
Since it's
thank
not
you.
an action, we don't have to vote on it in that regard, it's just advisory, so we'll authorize you to draft that letter and circulate for comments and see if we can get that off as soon as possible. Thank you all for your comments, and those of you from the public who commented, thank you, it added greatly. We do
I
have.
just want to say one thing to Hannah, is that this cultural resources management system, it is moving forward, by the way. Yeah, it's moving forward. It's in human resources.
So you know you have all of our support and encouragement.
Now, the next new business item, I question whether we need or not. According to Tim, he's saying that the CMP applies only to the lands managed by the university, and if that's the case, do we need to request the Board of Regents to amend the CMP?
Well,
Or do we want to have them confirm that it only applies?
I think we need to confirm, because the CMP specifically identifies the UH managed lands as the science reserve, 11,288 acre science reserve. That's what it specifically states. And
It's
I
a
think-
language intent, so.
Yeah, so I think by taking an action, you're adding clarity to the situation that the CMP applies only to UH managed land, regardless if it's 11,288 acres, 800 acres, and in compliance with the governor's mandate about giving the withdraw, the 10,000 acres back to full DLNR authority. If we just withdraw the lands, we keep the CMP the way it is, then you have that withdrawn lands would be covered by the CMP and DLNR. You'd have two entities responsible for the same parcel. So I think we've got so many issues and complications on the mountain already. And, you know, I like this term that you always use, Hannah, we need to have clarity. So by doing this action, you're adding clarity.
Okay, so how will this look? Will this be a letter that we send to the Board of Regents?
From the,
Eventually chain of command.
Yeah, same thing as before. Yes.
From a member of the Environment Committee, I just have to say that from my perspective, the issue of managing, for instance, introduced arthropods and other alien species is going to be much more difficult for the university should this land be returned, because I don't think that the resources are there through DLNR to do the kind of monitoring and both follow-up and control that the university has worked so hard to come up with regard to an invasive species plan. And I really have to commend Fritz for all the work that he's done, and of course Stephanie too, to develop that plan, because it's made so much encouraging sense of what needs to be done in terms of managing climate change and all the things that go along with climate change with regard to invasive species.
I appreciate your comment, and I would encourage you that since this process of the return of the 10,000 acres is going to go through the Board of Land and Natural Resources, it might be appropriate for you to make comments at that time to the proposal as it appears before them as to why you would discourage that.
Will do, will do.
Thank you very much.
yeah, maybe you can explain the process of this withdrawal.
You'll pay me for it.
Explain the process of this withdrawal.
So on the process itself, I think a couple of you have actually sort of pointed to it as something that needs to be clarified. This is not the first time that the state has gone through a process like this. It's true, this is a fairly large piece of land, but the process is fairly well known to DLNR, as Harry knows and as Roger knows. What will actually happen is that there'll be a request to withdraw lands from our lease, Mauna Kea Science Reserve lease. And that approval has to come first from the land board. The request is going to be made by the university to the land board, to the DLNR. They will vote on it. They may or may not put conditions on it. We may or may not agree to the conditions in terms of whether or not we continue certain studies. I think the invasive species studies, the arthropod studies, the AIS monitoring, archaeological monitoring. We've already offered to continue for at least a transition period, and they seem to be very receptive to it. What I actually see, by the way, is an extended transition period between the land board approval, which they will require, and the EO, which will have to be executed and approved by the governor. There's going to be a lot of time. I think the survey is going to, as Roger said, is going to be challenging. We haven't decided yet who's going to be paying for it. I think they're thinking we're going to pay for it. We're thinking that we haven't decided that yet. There are going to be other things too. I'm certainly going to be looking at the same time at probably rules, creating subsets of also the Forest Reserve, because it's a very large area, and how, if it's possible, to actually have the CMP and the subplans apply to both the return lands and our lands, managed lands. And enforcement, by the way, is really still an open issue. Enforcement is gonna be a big question because, that's sort of the basis of jurisdiction. If we're changing jurisdictions here, that has to be clarified. So we're gonna be having all sorts of discussions, even past the approval stage with the land board. Then it goes to the governor after everything is packaged, if you will. And as Roger said, there's no 343 requirement. It doesn't trigger an EA or an EIS or a permit. No departmental or board permits required for the action. In a way, the governor is really the lord of the EOs, right? That's why they call it executive orders. The executive makes the order. However, it is subject to reversal or voiding by the legislature at the following session. So after all this, after all these years, it still has to go past one legislative session. They need a supermajority to actually nullify the EO. So it's a political process, it's a regulatory process. So there's gonna be, I'm certain, a lot of planning in between. I think there's gonna be a lot of negotiations between the university and DLNR in the transition period. And I think, as everybody pointed to, the most challenging issue is gonna be, well, there's two. It's gonna be resources and jurisdiction.
And then, before it goes to that stage, we have the university process. So once there's a determination, once the university and DNR kind of come to some kind of agreement as to what is going to be withdrawn, we still need to go to Kahu, we still need to come to this board to get your recommendations as to whether or not that is, what you want, and your recommendation. Then it needs to go to the Board of Regents. Because that's a decision-making thing, because you're withdrawing lands from the lease. And then from there, it goes to the DLNR process. So there's still a lot of steps involved here.
Right, so can I get a motion then to send the letter to the Board of Regents requesting clarification that the application of the plan will be only to lands managed by the university? Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second, Karen, was Hannah. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we'll forward that recommendation on. All right, announcements. Any announcements before we adjourn today? It's been a rather lengthy meeting. Thank you for your time. Dwight?
I got one about the
Sure.
question of title, as usual.
All right, thank you.
If one was to read the Admission Act, like he said, pretend like you got authority, and that's what the Admission Act does. There's no authority coming from the Admission Act to create the state of Hawaii. It was all a fraud to begin with. The lands they call it Hawaiian homeland under Section 4, Section 5F, available public lands. And if you read 5G, to tell you what those lands are, it's actually Crown and government lands. Still belong to the kingdom. The only one that has jurisdiction is the Hawaiian Kingdom. That's never been transferred to anyone, not to the United States by the Republic of Hawaii. None of that ever happened. So you gotta remember that, the land title is still in question. UH did not have a lease in 1968. There is no demised lands here. They're either designated crown lands or government lands that still belong to the kingdom within the jurisdiction of this kingdom. So all this talk about transferring the fraud or the stolen goods is all you guys talking about. Gotta get to the issue. And there's no court that can deal with the land issue now. The United States Court has limited jurisdiction over the illegal acts of the agents and officers under the U.S. Constitution. Northwest Ordinance has no jurisdiction over this kingdom, or give the U.S. any jurisdiction. And there's no political question, because we're talking about a Hawaiian kingdom. And the U.S. is separate sovereigns. So I'll reserve the rights of this kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. All right, next item, next meeting, according to the survey that was submitted and passed to me by Don, it looks like our next meeting will be on September 22nd at 10 a.m. We'll put that on your calendars. Is there any other new business before we adjourn today? All right, thank you very much for coming. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down.
Has left the content.
Specifically taking the same criteria.
Has left the content.
I get problems out of the David City. We have 1.5 million for the David City. It does, stuff is gonna happen, even in the fall. So it's just like.